We kind of made up a narrative about what would be the crisis that set in motion, actually that set the precedent for the need that we want to fill. This could also apply, by the way, to the crisis that we actually did experience prior a couple of years ago, especially in the Balkans, regarding earthquakes and natural disasters. But our theoretical one is kind of the opposite of the COVID crisis, where because of COVID we couldn't interact with one another in a physical sense, so we were kind of forced to do it in an electronic sense. In our hypothetical situation, there's a meteor approaching Earth that's going to cause an EMP blast, so all the electronics are going to be shut off. We are thinking, how would that influence the situation? How would that present, what kind of crisis would present itself? If anybody remembers the Y2K panic, all electronics shutting off on a global level in a world which is quite dependent on electronics, especially after the COVID crisis, a lot of problems will arise. So the thing was, we identified that the main problem is, and this is also something that we saw in a lot of lectures during these projects, when it's about volunteers, their main problem is they're not adaptive enough. They are not adaptive enough or motivated enough to push on through the program. So, not saying that everybody gives up at a certain point. There's a lot of fall off. A lot of volunteers cannot or are not willing to, or it's just too much for them to continue on. So we thought about how can we make a training program that provides them with the necessary skills and the mentality to push through. And we, first of all, in a group, since we had the pleasure of having a few experts that deal with marginalized groups, as well as experts that are concerned with learning and teaching, we decided to make a training program in the wild, a survival camp basically, that will also have a certain element of education. So they would be pushed into the training program without any internet, without any phones, nothing electronical, just bare necessities to survive in nature, cut off from the world, and specifically focused on their groups, which would consist of specialists as well, who would teach them how to survive in nature. But that's not just specifically so they can survive in nature, but because we also believe that such basic skills teach them as well how to adapt and incorporate new skill sets on the fly. So when they're presented with a new situation, they can contemplate what kind of skills they need to interact with the current predicament. So how they can best approach the problem that's presented. Whether that problem be something that they were prepared for or something that just sprung up. Preparation is also one quick key thing that we want to teach. So how to try and be prepared for any situation, but it's not the hinge. It's they need to be also aware that you cannot be prepared for everything. That you have to be able to adapt in the moment. And also, since we mentioned marginalized groups, it's quite important for them to be aware of how to be aware of potential problems and potential people that will need their help. This is the part of the education program where during the survival training and stuff, they would have small sessions discussing and contemplating on where they can focus their efforts. And also on top of all of that, there's also two more factors that are quite important, and that's emotional and psychological resilience.